This is Dale Maharidge. Michael Williamson's not with me today to talk on this audio slideshow, but he's going to be here in spirit. All these pictures, except the last three, were taken by Michael. They're outtakes from our very first Hobo trip in April of 1982. This begins with us waiting in the Sacramento rail yard that very first day. We waited all day and all night and caught out that night from Sacramento heading north, heading up to Oroville, California. But this is kind of what it's like to ride the rails. That's why we're including this in this show. That first trip in 1982 was very intense for both Michael and myself. We knew we were getting into something very large, very heavy, but we didn't realize exactly how the people we met and how the trains we rode on would affect us. Early on, we met this man, Tony, in the Sacramento yard. We caught out late that night. I remember it was an open car carrier. And I remember seeing the dome of the capital of California passing in the night, the white beacon of it vanishing behind us as we headed into this black void. We ended up in Oroville, California, the rail yard there, the Western Pacific Rail Yard, which is about 70 miles north of Sacramento, loaded with hobos. So the second morning, we woke up to a Butte County Sheriff's deputy who rounded all the hobos up within sight and warned us that if we were there come sundown, we were all going to jail. I write about this more in depth in the blog that goes with this audio slideshow. You can check out the textual story if you go to that. But in the meantime, while we waited for that train so we wouldn't get arrested, we started working our story, and we ran into Tim Caldwell. He was a timberman who lost his job, never thought he'd end up as a hobo. Here he was in a boxcar waiting to catch south. Tim's one of those guys you don't forget. I don't need to look at my notes to remember his name or his story. So we interviewed him, and then we got a Burlington Northern, the Big Nothing as the hobos call it, heading north up the Feather River Canyon with Lisa and Wayne. You can see riding the rails has many dangers, among them that trains sometimes derail. And you can see the boxcars tumble into the canyon here. The route was littered with tumbled boxcars, so this is not an unusual experience. Traveling ahead of us was an old-time hobo named Maxie. We talked to him in the yard, and he was riding that flat car ahead of us, as hobos call it, a convertible. And on a sunny day like this, it's a great ride. That night was a different story. Once we cleared the Feather River Canyon, the train started highballing up towards Oregon, towards Klamath Falls, and it was cold. Again, I write about this in the blog and more in the book, actually. But I will say Michael's teeth were chattering over the roar of the boxcar rattling and shaking. It was probably about 20 degrees actual air temperature and probably 25 below wind chill factor. We got caught by the bull in K Falls. We almost went to jail. So we woke up in near the Southern Pacific Yard, and this is us. The ground was frozen. It was a cold night. And K Falls is amazing. It's just so freezing. The wind blows there all the time over these lakes, and I'd never been so cold in memory. So we walk into town. Nobody cares like Jesus, as the billboard says. They got some food. We watched Lisa cook. And then we left the couple and started working the yard. This is from the overpass looking west from the Southern Pacific Yard. To the right is an ice house that we ended up spending a lot of time around that day. Talking to hobos, new and old. We met all sorts of bows. Lots of old-timers like this fella. Hobos were jungled all over the place in K Falls. So we were going to catch south on the Southern Pacific. We'd come up on the Western Pacific, and we were going to try to catch out. So we were hanging out by the ice house. As you can see here, Michael likes to have twofers in his picture. Here you got the hobos waiting for the train, and you've got the motorhome on the overpass, where the pictures you saw earlier were taken from. A couple of things. We went up to this fellow, and he had a traveling companion who showed up. They were Mexican nationals, and they were clearly hungry. We had some tuna with tops in our backpacks, so we gave them the tuna, and so we went around the little shack there. We heard pounding. We came around, and they were trying to pound the cans open with rocks. They didn't know how to get them open. They didn't know you could just pull the ring top. Those kind of cans were brand new back in those days. So we showed them how to open the cans. They gleefully ate, and then we waited for a train. Michael climbed the ice house on this rickety ladder, And that's me sitting on the concrete slab there, taking in the sun. It was so cold. That sun felt so good. We were so tired. We hadn't slept, and this is 2 days out now. We barely had slept. We had brought wine with us. We figured we would use it to give to old hobos, and they tell our stories, and we'd learn things. And we learned that most of the hobos don't drink during the day, and a lot of them don't even drink at night. But it was cold, and so I drank the wine. The train didn't come, so we ended up, because we were scared, just sleeping out, I climbed that ladder with the pack, and Michael brought his pack up, and we slept on top of the ice house that night. This is the view as the sun set. The next day, late, we caught a freight south and ended up going through the Dunsmuir yard, where there was a mean bull that the old hobo who taught me how to ride the rails said would crack your head at a nightclub. And so we crawled to the top of the train and clung to the roof of the grain car as we came into that yard so he couldn't catch us. And then we caught south, and this picture's taken in the Central Valley. We met other hobos, like these guys. Ended up going to the Roseville yard and waiting for a train for a long time there. I didn't feel we had enough story. Michael didn't either. We figured we have to do some more reporting and photographing. So we headed south in a rock car on the SP line all the way down to Fresno. And there we ran into Fred Johnson, another man. I do not need to look at my notes to remember his story. He was a forklift operator. Through a series of bad events, he lost his job due to a layoff, no fault of his own. Lost his house, lost his car. Never thought he'd be a hobo. We talked to him for like an hour. He's sitting here trackside. And then finally I asked him, I said, so Fred, where do you think you're going to be in here? And he says, buddy, I might be sitting right here. And he started crying. So we had some heavy stories and an important story. And we rode back north. We wanted to come in like hobos, not like Greyhound riders or airplane riders. So we rode a freight train north, and it left us off north of Sacramento. We walked into the B. This is Michael walking into the newsroom, taking the picture taken by Morgan Ong. He went to see his wife, who worked in another department. Then we went to see Bill Moore, the city editor, to tell him what we'd found. I'm really glad Morgan Ong documented this, because it was a very special moment. 6 days on the rails, our first rail riding trip, and we had a whole bunch of train riding ahead of us later that year.